All right, there's a big truck right outside the house, so if it makes a lot of noise, I'm sorry. I got to do this video because I have something to do today. I don't have a lot of time, so yeah, let's get into it. So last week I did a spoken word on Martin Luther King. I was really excited about doing that spoken word. I put a lot of work into it, a lot of research. I read books, I read articles, I watched like 4 or 5 documentaries, and I learned so much about him. Some things I knew, some things I was reminded of, and some things were just completely new to me. So as I was doing my research and putting together the spoken word, I couldn't put it all into the spoken word. It was just too much. It would have been like a 20-minute long spoken word. So I thought that I would share some interesting facts that you might not know about Martin Luther King. Yeah, and I just thought that would be a really cool video to make. So let's get into these facts. So the first thing is that Martin Luther King Jr. was not originally named Martin Luther King Jr. He was born Michael King. Not as cool sounding as Martin Luther King, but Mike King. So when some people heard that in my spoken word, they reached out to me and told me they didn't know. But what I didn't get to add into the spoken word is how he got his name. Now, I did say that he was named after Martin Luther, but here's how it happened. His dad was a pastor of a church, I believe it was called Ebenezer Church, if I'm not mistaken, and they sent him over to Europe. And he traveled to Europe, then he went to different places, and then he went to Germany. And when he was in Germany, he was inspired by Martin Luther, so inspired that when he came back home from his trip, he changed his name and he changed Martin's name, Michael's name, to Martin. You know what I'm trying to say. Another interesting fact, and I actually did mention this one in my spoken word, but he went to college when he was 15. Really wanted to mention that again because that's crazy. Like 15, at 15, you're in like, what, 9th grade? Maybe 10th grade? You're not in college. He was in college. That's pretty impressive. Another thing I didn't get to put into my spoken word is that Martin Luther King was really good at pool, apparently. A lot of the articles that I read referred to him as a pool shark. I'm not sure if he was an actual pool shark because when you're a pool shark, you con people, but he might have been. Either way, he was good at pool, and I just think that was really amazing. I can't imagine Martin Luther King in the pool hall smoking and just knocking them down, you know what I'm saying? I have a dream that one day, corner pocket, got him. Martin Luther King was good at pool. Pretty cool. One thing that I found out about him that was really interesting and kind of put things in perspective for me was that when he was younger, I can't remember what age, but he actually attempted suicide. And here's what happened. He was attending a rally or a protest or something, and I don't think he was supposed to be there. And while he was there, his grandmother passed away, and I think the guilt just weighed on him, and he attempted suicide by jumping out of a window or something like that. Fortunately, he was okay and he survived. Yeah, it just put things in perspective because sometimes you look at our heroes, somebody like Martin Luther King, you just look at them as these like super human beings that nothing can penetrate. You hear about things like that, you're like, wow. It kind of brings you back to he's human, just like me. He goes through things just like me. Sometimes we forget that because of the image that we're used to seeing. So I thought that was interesting. Now this right here, I wanted to put into the spoken word, but I couldn't figure it out and it was just too wordy and I just kind of left it out, but I thought this was really interesting. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect in 1863. Martin Luther King was born in 1929. That's 66 years apart. Martin Luther King lived for 39 years. He was assassinated in 1968, so that's 39 years. Martin Luther King died wait, let me check. Sometimes I gotta do the math because I can't do it all in my head. So 52 years from this year, Martin Luther King was assassinated. What blew my mind about this, all of this was not long ago. Sometimes we think about slavery, we think about segregation, and we think that it happened hundreds of years ago, and that's not true. It's not hundreds of years ago. Matter of fact, I think it's 157 years total from the Emancipation Proclamation till this year. So we're like 2 or 3 generations removed from when slavery was acceptable in this country. That means my parents were alive during segregation, and their parents were alive when the slaves were freed, or they were actually slaves themselves. And my grandparents, I guess my great-grandparents, were definitely slaves because that's just what it was back then. Crazy. Now, I learned this while watching one of the documentaries, Martin Luther King's secretary, and she was talking about his I Have a Dream speech. And she says during that speech that he was actually losing the crowd. Now, I know that's hard to imagine. I really can't imagine it because he's such a great speaker. We've seen the speeches on YouTube and everything, but she said he was losing the crowd. And Mahalia Jackson happened to yell out, "Tell them about the dream." And that's when he went right into the famous "I Have a Dream" speech that we just hold in such high regard. I just thought that was super interesting, super amazing. And she actually heard that story from someone else. She didn't hear Mahalia Jackson yell it out herself, but somebody who was on stage with Martin told her that story. So she says allegedly, so let me make sure I put that out there. I believe it though. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, this is like super special to me, and this like completely caught me off guard. And it's that Martin Luther King actually has a Grammy for, I think, Best Spoken Word Album. Like, don't get me wrong, I know he's good at like speaking, but he got a Grammy for doing a spoken word. I'm like, that's what I do. I can't tell you how proud I was in that moment. And let me just read it so you know exactly how it happened. So he won the Grammy in 1971. So he won it after his death. And it was for Best Spoken Word Album category for his speech, "Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam." Super cool. So yeah, I just thought that was super interesting, and I didn't get to put everything into my spoken word, so I really wanted to just share that with you guys. So if you enjoyed this video, and if you thought that was interesting, if you drew any kind of value from this video, make sure you hit the like button. I earned it. If you want to stick around for more, make sure you subscribe, because I'll be here posting videos, doing my thing. Will you? That was so corny. I hate it. I love it, but I hate it. I hate it. I'm gonna leave it in.